One of the hardest things in the NHL is keeping a winning team together. Only 19 teams in NHL history have won consecutive championships, mostly coming at points when the league had just 6 or 12 organizations. In the salary cap era, that number drops to just 3. Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, and now, the Florida Panthers. Florida's been able to keep this team together for a variety of reasons. You can give credit to the incredible GMing and oversight given by Bill Zito over the past 5 years. You could give credit to the great drafting and pickups both their amateur and professional scouting departments have done. You can even give credit to the location they play in, with the argument Florida has an inherent advantage with the city's lack of state tax. Whatever the reason, it's impossible to deny Florida is an incredible team, and today we'll be looking at all these reasons as to why this iteration of the Florida Panthers is now among the greatest teams ever created, and a modern era dynasty. Keeping a championship team together really is difficult. Contending teams are almost always forced to change from year to year, and the Panthers were no exception. That said, the losses that Florida had to deal with were pretty minor compared to changes other teams have been forced to make. Their top 5 scorers in the regular season last year were the exact same 5 that took those spots this year, just in a different order. The biggest losses were the likes of Brandon Montour, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Anthony Stolarz. Tarasenko was a deadline acquisition, and Stolarz didn't play a single full playoff game, so those losses were pretty replaceable. Montour, however, would sting, as the player who had played the most minutes for them on both of their last 2 deep runs left to Seattle. Of course, Florida was able to adjust over the course of the season and built something even better. Early returns into the regular season showed that Florida didn't really need a replacement. Even without their former 1D, other players were stepping up, and they were fighting for first place in the Atlantic Division into the new year. They were doing good, but just good has never been enough for this team, and even without needing it, they soon found their minute-munching replacement defenseman. In March, they moved out Spencer Knight and their 2026 first in exchange for Seth Jones. The Panthers once again had a right side as good as any team in the league, with the ability to deploy Jones or Aaron Ekblad in the situations that fit them best. The Panthers grabbed one of the biggest names on the market, adding to their top 10 defense. But why stop there? This team knows what they are, and knows what they can do. And so, they added another huge name, taking everyone by surprise by pulling Brad Marchand out of Boston for, what due in large part to this move's success, ended up being a first-round pick, an absolute bargain for the value he would prove to provide. With that, this 2025 team was set, and went on to prove their worth again over the course of 4 rounds, clearly and decisively proving themselves against each opponent. It's not every year that the best, most complete team wins the Stanley Cup, but for these past 2 years, that's certainly been the case. The Florida Panthers are clearly the most complete team in the NHL. There's no better example of that than their third line. If you look at Florida's top line, it's clearly excellent, one of the best in the league. But it is beatable, is a line you can see losing shifts against some of the incredible talent around the league. Same thing with their second line, again, rivaling the best second lines across the league, but maybe not the best, and is susceptible to being beat on talent when matched against top teams. But Florida's third line is where they really pull away, a line recently assembled that is clearly the best third line in the NHL, and one that is a perfect fit for both the Florida Panthers and their overall style of playoff hockey. Not much more than a throw-in prospect in the Vincent Trocheck trade in 2020, Eetu Luostarinen has been developed into a perfect middle-to-bottom 6 forward. He takes up the left wing on Florida's elite third line, laying the body in addition to killing penalties on their second unit. Anton Lundell, selected with the highest pick Florida's had over the past 7 drafts, has proven the Panthers right to trust his talent at that slot. The 3C raises his game every postseason and averages the most time on ice outside of the top 6. Then you have Marchand, a type of player that exists on very few rosters in the NHL today. Marchand's style, experience, and clutch factor resulted in him being the perfect fit for Florida, completing what is one of the best third lines the NHL has ever seen. This line perfectly exemplifies what the Florida Panthers are. 3 completely different types of players, but who all play winning hockey. All 3 are winners, and they compete like winners. That's the theme all throughout Florida's lineup. Their star players fight harder than any other team's stars. They're aggressively forechecking, creating turnovers and offense out of nothing. They're constantly fighting, relentless, and if they lose a game, they'll make sure that the loss isn't easy and that their opponents are sore and bruised after it's over. Compete is the core requirement for a player to be a Florida Panther. And whether you're a power forward like Luosterainen, a two-way center like Lundell, or a whatever you would call Marchand, all that matters is that you compete and that you can win. And wouldn't you know it, when you're built with the express purpose to win in the playoffs, you win in the playoffs. That's always been Florida's goal, obviously, but they've went all in on that for years in a manner very few other teams are willing to do. Not only have they went all in on committing to the direction they've gone in, they've done so in a manner that was widely unpopular, in a manner that only the Florida Panthers management themselves saw working out in the way that it did. 58 wins, 18 losses, 6 overtime losses. The 2021-22 season is, to this day, still far and away Florida's best regular season finish. Most of that was under interim head coach Andrew Brunette, who after that season looked to be the surefire next head coach after the season they'd had. But Panthers management wasn't convinced. The team played fun, flashy, exciting hockey, the type that got them the President's Trophy, but also got them swept in the second round by the Tampa Bay Lightning. They brought in Paul Maurice ahead of the next season, again, a wildly unpopular choice, and have been proven about as right as they could be, making the Cup finals in every single season with him in charge. This is underratedly maybe the most significant move that Bill Zito has made as Panthers GM. Almost every organization in the league would have stuck with Brunette after what he accomplished. Not Zito and not the Panthers, and they've been proven right to hire Maurice and adjust their game for the playoffs. Bill Zito is without a doubt the best GM in hockey, and has been basically since the moment he took over in Florida. They've been the most successful team in the NHL since he's gotten there, overall in both the regular season and playoffs. It's not been perfect. He's made plenty of unpopular moves, and they haven't all worked out. Ben Sherratt was acquired for a first-round pick, then walked for nothing after a disappointing playoffs. But you're allowed to make those mistakes when you then risk everything by trading away one of the best players in your franchise's history and turn that into a superstar power forward that's been one of the key driving forces in winning consecutive cups and a surefire future franchise legend. Not only has Zito been able to acquire these players, the Panthers also have Tkachuk, along with Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Jones, Forsling, and Lundell signed for 5 or more additional seasons, with each and every one of those deals posing fantastic value for Florida. There have been questions as to how much of that is good management and how much of that comes from Florida's inherent advantages. Florida does benefit from being one of few states with no income tax, meaning players signed to deals take home more of their money on their contracts. However, successfully convincing players to take less on their deals because of that is a skill. The standard could have very well been set that players command the same amount of money regardless of state taxation. Florida is supposedly using this to convince players to take less, which speaks to the strength of their management team. It is without a doubt an advantage, but Florida is not the only team afforded that advantage, just the one that has used it to the greatest benefit. With the ability to negotiate these excellent contracts, Bill Zito and the Panthers were able to build a superpower. The Panthers had flash and high-volume scoring, and swapped that out in favor of compete, depth, and even outright nastiness. They now boast a roster capable of rolling out all 4 lines and all 3 pairs. The team had 9 different players reach 15-plus points in the playoffs, a milestone that still excludes players like Ekblad, Jones, or Forsling. The organization has constructed a roster and culture that is championship-worthy, with no real signs or indications that they will be slowing down over the years. Considering all of this, it seems appropriate to designate the Florida Panthers as a dynasty within the 2020s. It's been tough to define a team as such since the 80s and 90s, given how much more challenging the league has gotten with the salary cap and additional franchises. Only 3 teams in the salary cap era have won consecutive Stanley Cups, and none of those have held on to their greatness for as long as the likes of the Islanders or Oilers teams of the 80s did. The Panthers have positioned themselves as strong as those dominant Lightning or Penguins teams we've seen in recent years. They could very well be in conversations as being as good as those Chicago Blackhawks teams that claimed 3 cups in 5 seasons. They're already an argument among some of the greatest teams we've seen over the past 25 years. The only difference is, their story isn't finished. Florida has built, tore down, and built up again over the course of the past few years, maybe making more significant moves than any other organization. The result of making those moves successfully has been the reward of 2 consecutive Stanley Cups, all for a core of star players that, for the most part, have yet to even reach 30 years of age. Florida is at risk of losing Aaron Ekblad and Sam Bennett in the offseason, in addition to Brad Marchand. The inability to re-sign or replace these players could lead to Florida falling below championship standard next season. That said, because of how well the team is structured in the cap, they also have $19 million of cap space to work with. And even if they didn't, is there any doubt about Florida's ability to reshape and retool their team at this point? The Florida Panthers are the gold standard on every level in the National Hockey League at the moment. It feels as if the organization does everything right, and that translates to the ice directly, where it feels like their players do everything right. The organization is a modern-day dynasty, with no signs of slowing down. The Panthers will take their days or weeks to celebrate, and then you can be sure that they'll be right back to it, fighting for their 3rd consecutive championship. And every other team in the league can only hope to try and keep up with one of the greatest teams we've ever seen.